Hello and welcome to Africa Update on Trust TV, where we'll give you information on what's happening on the continent, the African beautiful continent. Now, this week, we're going to be looking at the World Bank's International Development Association IDA Summit for African Heads of State that held in Nairobi, Kenya. And also, we'll be looking at the International Workers' Day that just happened sometime this week as well. That's the things we have for you on the program this week, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It's still Africa Update here on Trust TV, and I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Now, African leaders gathered in Nairobi for the IDA Summit, that is the International Development Association, a World Bank arm that works to, generate funds for low-income companies. Now, the International Summit for African Heads of State was focusing on enhancing sustainable development through favorable lending terms and strategic approaches. The summit provided a platform for discussions on maximizing the impact of IDA funding to drive economic growth, alleviate poverty, and enhance livelihoods across Africa. It was co-hosted by the government of Kenya and the World Bank Group. Now, President William Ruto of Kenya, that's the host country's president, emphasized the continent's urgency for change and called for increased donor contributions to IDA 21. Also, the World Bank Group President R.J. Banga echoed these sentiments, emphasizing the need for steadfast global support, particularly for IDA as Africa progresses towards a prosperous future. Now, what is IDA 21? Now, the international development, the concessional arm of the World Bank, which offers grants and low-interest loans to the world's 75 lowest income countries, is currently developing its policy and financial package for its latest round of funding, which is known as IDA 21. And that funding is set to conclude in December. Now, let's take a look at what was said by the Kenyan president and the World Bank president.
If there was a case to be made for a win-win outcome, IDA is the best example, because everybody wins. The donors win, the recipients win. The donors win because it is an investment for them. For the recipients, it is an opportunity. In both cases, we have winners. The donors will put money in renewable energy, in energy in general, and we can continue world manufacturing and industrialization using African mineral resources, using energy that we have in abundance, and using labor that we have in abundance, and we can share the outcome of that industrialization with the rest of the world. By investing in IDA, we unlock 60% of the world's arable and cultivated land for food security and nutrition, not just for Africa, but for the globe. By investing in IDA, we unlock the human resource potential in our continent, Africa being the youngest continent in the world. Investing in education, in health, in social protection gives us the opportunity to provide 40% of the world's workforce by 2050. Investing in IDA gives us the opportunity to decarbonize global economy and provide for green growth.
We are here united by a shared vision for the future of Africa, a continent that is rich in diversity, in culture, in potential. It is very easy to feel hopeful when we are together anywhere in Africa. You feel the sun on your face, the wind at your back, the fertile and mineral-rich earth under your feet, and most importantly, you feel the infectious energy of young people. But these are the ingredients that can power the future. They are not new blessings, and over the course of history, this abundance has too often brought profiteering rather than prosperity. Today, we are focused on a brighter future for every country on the continent and the people who call it home. The International Development Association has been a steadfast partner in Africa's development journey. This summit symbolizes our objective commitment to accelerating progress. But we have to move with urgency, we have to move with purpose, and we have to have a focus on results and on impact. This will require more from IDA, it will require more from all parts of the World Bank Group, it will require more from governments, and it will require more from the private sector.
Now, that was the President of Kenya, William Ruto, and the World Bank President giving their speeches at the IDA Summit for African Heads of State. Now, joining us from Kenya is Philip Pandey, a youth inclusion advocate. Hello, Philip. How are you doing?
Hello, Chiamaka. It's a pleasure to join you this evening, and good evening from Kisumu, Kenya. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. It's safe to say Happy New Year. This is the first time we'll be having you on Africa Update this year, right?
It's been a while, and I know a lot has happened since I was last in this show, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you, to talk to the African people and the world at large on matters that are so close to us, especially on development of the continent.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, you were at that event, you were at the IDA Summit live at that event. It happened in your country, yes, actually, you're the host country. So can you just give us an overview of the event generally?
It was indeed a good event for young people to attend, and I was most privileged to represent the young people in Kenya and across Africa at the summit. There were 11 of us physically present at the summit, which was a great thing on matters youth inclusion, which is what we talk about on a daily basis. Interacting with close to, I think, 20 heads of states, including presidents and primaries from across Africa, deputy presidents, and your own deputy president was present with us in Nairobi, Chiamaka. A lot of development practitioners, World Bank top officials, including the president, Ajay Banga, who was addressing the gathering in Nairobi. In solidarity with the African Union leadership, the chairperson was present with us in Nairobi. And I would say that a lot of development narrative again put across, shared by vision carriers and bearers in the place of heads of states. But fundamentally, Chiamaka, is that there is work to be done in Africa, there is work to be done in Kenya and everywhere from the 5 regions of the continent.
Okay. Now you're taking us into the conversation. So I'm going to start, because we know IDA is all about funding for lowest income countries, and apparently Africa seems to fall into that category. And now, my first question would be, how can IDA funding be optimized now to support sustainable development projects in African nations, particularly in sectors such as infrastructure, healthcare, and education?
Well, Chiamaka, the conversation has always been moving from aid to trade. And I believe that's the main reason as to why the African Union, for example, came together to put forth the Agenda 2063, which is quite key on the development of the continent. The FCTA launched 2 years ago. This year, the component and the protocols on women and youth quite being implemented in a number of countries that have ratified and signed off the deal. And there is need that this is met halfway by development partners, including the World Bank, including IDA, which is providing financing for quite a number of projects, not just in the health sector, education, but again in what we are calling jobs and economic transformation. So there are quite a number of pillars that IDA is talking about. But for me, what is most important, other than climate change, which is fundamental,
Yeah,
and the need to address the devastating impact and effects of climate change. Today, we're talking about cyclones in Malawi. We are talking about heavy flooding in Kenya and across a number of East African countries. It is fundamental that those areas be supported, but prosperity, people first, before climate, before any other thing. And that's why, as young people, we want to talk more about jobs and economic transformation, because it is only by skilling, reskilling, retooling, and equipping the population of Africa, which is fundamentally young people, that we can move to the next level of having skilled labor that then participates in economic development, participates in generating incomes for our countries and for the continent. And so IDA has talked quite about of improvement in terms of funding, a lot of money coming to African countries, 75% of the funding, utilized on the African continent. We're talking about the banks talking about at least 13 million teachers recruited and trained since 2015. Close to 1.2 billion people having access to, basic healthcare, and over 91 million in terms of electricity connections to new households and overall new connections. And on the aspect of job creation, and that's where I am more particular about, is that over 51 million jobs have been created since I think about 2018 to the 2022 fiscal year. And that is important. For us, the question is how many of these jobs are on the African continent, and how many young people can strongly say that, yes, indeed, the operations, the funding, the support from IDA have changed lives and transformed evidence-based practices within our spaces, that we can count one against other numbers, that the African continent is making progress through the investments of the bank.
So I know that you're a youth inclusion advocate, and of course you went there representing the youths of Kenya. Now, in that summit, were there things that were spoken about tailored to the youths of the African continent? As you just earlier stated, this continent, human capital, are the young people that we have. The majority of the population are the young people. So were there things said in that regard?
Indeed, there was a conversation that looked particularly on the welfare of the youth. And I would say that I take cue on the statement made by President Samia Suluhu of Tanzania. Her focus was on skills and skilling the workforce of the continent. I would also appreciate the sentiments of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of Uganda on the need to make Africa the source of manufacturing, the home of manufacturing, and not the exporter of raw material. I take cognizant of the wordings of our very own President William Ruto on the aspect of being cognizant of the growing population of Africa, the vibrancy of the continent. Chiamaka, we are aware that in less than 3 decades, Africa is going to be home of at least a third of the world labor force. We are going to be hosting at least 1 out of 4 people living on the face of the earth. And this is going to be predominantly young people. Are we getting ready for this? Is the bank and IDA supporting this? And that's why the pillar on people, the pillar on prosperity, and the pillar on jobs and economic transformation becomes fundamental and the epicenter of action. As young people in Kenya, as young people in East Africa, we are aware of the skills gap, even amongst those who are trained by the top-notch institutions. And the Inter-University Commission for Council for East Africa is talking about more than 50% of graduates not being ready for the workplace. Last year, the Federation of Kenyan Employers established that this is actually true because employers are looking for, labor, skilled personnel, but they can't meet it. But out there, we have at least 6 out of 10 young people on the continent of Africa looking for jobs, but they can't find it. It's because there is a fundamental mismatch between skills and what employers are looking for. So how can the contributions of IDA and World Bank transform these skills, retool the young people to ensure that we are not just becoming victims of artificial intelligence, we are not victims of the revolution on the digital economy, but we can compete, we can strongly be in the space, stand our ground, and be able to contribute meaningfully without the aspect of technology or any threat of shrinking a job market or the workspace interfering with the possibility of young people from Africa to earn a living. Therefore, it is fundamental from picking the words of the heads of states, the presidents, the prime ministers and their deputies on production of jobs, on internal manufacturing, on exporting finished goods, on ensuring that agriculture and youth in agribusiness, for example, becomes an agenda of the vast continent of Africa. Your very own, former president Obasanjo has a well-articulated document on the ability of Africa to produce and feed itself, arguing that over 60% of our land is arable. Yeah. How can we take advantage of this in the aspect of funding and IDA funding for that matter? And so, yes, I acknowledge that there was a fundamental discussion on jobs, on transformation, but we are not feeling the oomph from our heads of state. We are not giving it a priority, and we keep on beseeching our presidents, beseeching the bank, and beseeching stakeholders that at the very core must be jobs, jobs, and jobs.
Okay, so yes, jobs, jobs, and jobs, meaning that companies should come here, build, just like they do in China. They go to China for labor. They can come here because we have young people, build their companies, and hire the Africans to work in those companies, therefore creating jobs and, of course, resources and livelihoods for the African people. Now, just before you go, let's talk about transparency and accountability. And I'd like for you to be very brief with this one now. How can we, can we say this fundings from IDA, our governments, in Africa, we have amazing, beautiful people on this wonderful continent, so how is IDA seeing to it that the funds, whether large, whether little, is going to where it's being directed to go to?
Maybe I should begin by demystifying this, Chiamaka, that accountability is not just an African affair, that good governance is not just an African issue. Okay. It is a challenge world over, that corruption is from Middle East to Africa, to the south, to the north, and that every country in one way or another is affected by this jargon, this monster on corruption, on pilferage, on wastage of public offers. Okay. One thing that I must say that we argued for, and I would say, Chiamaka, before the main plenary, young people from across Africa had a virtual conversation, bringing 75 of us from across all the 55 states on how young people could benefit and how nations can maximize funding from across institutions such and development partners such as IDA. It is fundamental that heads of states and ministers of finance across African nations must help to put in place measures to tone down on wastage, to tone down on pilferage. And the bank through the aspect on prosperity and good governance, must support aspects on accountability and building capacities of African leaders, African governments, and projects particularly that are benefiting from this funding to be able to maximize every dollar, every coin. Just as the bank says and IDA says that in every $1 on donor funding, then there is another 3.5 in investment. We need to see that return on investment on monies that are advanced to African nations. We've talked about over 1475 projects that have been supported by IDA over the last period ending this fiscal year. How can we account for each and every dollar invested in these 1475 projects? That's fundamental.
I'm very passionate about this conversation, but time wouldn't allow us to really continue and have more of it. But it's been a pleasure having you on Africa Update, and I'm sure we'll have you again maybe sometime soon.
Always looking forward, Chiamaka. It's a pleasure talking to you on Africa Update, addressing our people on the continent on the gains we must make and the steps we must take in converting this as the home and the pride of everyone that lives on this continent.
All right. Thank you so much. And now, before we go on the break, what's coming up is our Workers' Day celebration here in Nigeria, Ghana, and in South Africa. Please do stay with us. With us on Africa Update on Trust TV. Now, Workers' Day celebration, known as International Labour Day, also known as May Day or Workers' Day, falls on May 1st every year and is celebrated by people around the world. This year's theme is focused on safety and health of the worker. In Nigeria here, the discussion, however, was solely on the economic situation and the cost of living of the workers. Here's a report put together by Sagu Ibrahim.
The NLC president, who was speaking during this year's May Day commemoration at the Eagle Square in Abuja, warned that should negotiations continue to stall till the end of the month of May, the union will no longer guarantee industrial harmony in Nigeria.
Nigeria looks up to us, and we must not fail. Consequently, the Nigerian Labour Congress and TUC have made it clearly and emphatically that should the minimum wage negotiation continue and linger till the end of May, we can no longer guarantee industrial harmony in this country. Our nation is facing challenges with centrifugal forces tightening their grip and citizens increasingly disillusioned with leadership. This disconnect has eroded civic ownership of governance, fueling calls for more efficient and responsive systems.
Other members of the organized labor spoke on the need for improvement in other areas affecting the welfare of Nigerians.
A nation unable to secure itself isn't ready for development. Economic growth hinges on insecurity. We can't ignore these existential issues. Investing in people secure the nation. It's time to prioritize the people for a secure and prosperous nation.
Workers should continue to struggle because all along there is nothing that a worker have gotten in the world that is given to him on the platter of gold. It has always been through collective struggle, and therefore this day reminds us of that struggle, that we must continue to struggle to get what is desirable, because we create the wealth, and if we create the wealth, we must demand for social justice. And the foundation of peace anywhere around the world is social justice.
On the government side, President of Nigeria, represented by the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, revealed that the days of worry for Nigerian workers are over, and the federal government remains open to suggestions to ensure a living wage for Nigerian workers.
I assure you that your days of worrying are over. Indeed, this government is open to the committee's suggestion of not just a minimum wage, but a living wage. I urge you and all our fellow citizens to place your trust in this administration. The seeds of greatness planted in our nation are beginning to bear fruits, and they promise a future filled with hope. and bound by prosperity.
Away from the business of championing the cause for a better welfare for Nigerian workers, the unionist had time for a little fanfare. As is customary for every May Day celebration, the Vice President was present to take the salute from the Solidarity March past from the different workers' union present. In spite of the challenging economic climate which has impacted their purchasing power, these workers remain resilient and eager to contribute to the nation's prosperity. For now, they hold on to hope that their efforts will soon yield a better life for themselves and their families. From the Eagle Square in Abuja, Sagir Ibrahim, reporting for Trust TV.
Such a colorful fanfare. And in Ghana and South Africa, let's take a look at how they celebrated their Workers' Day, with South Africa celebrating in solidarity with Palestine.
We are here standing in support of our government, of our movement, in support of the Palestinian cause. Our freedom, comrade, is not complete until the people of Palestine are free and they are liberated.
That's part of our package on Africa Update this week. For more of our programs, documentaries, please do well to follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I am Chiamaka Nwafor. Bye for now.